At 91 years old, with only months left to live, a frail Filipino grandfather walked onto the stage of America's biggest talent show, not to win a prize, not to chase fame, but to sing one last love song to the wife he had buried just 6 months earlier. The judges expected a sweet moment. What they witnessed instead left the entire theater in stunned silence. If you believe love never dies, subscribe now and stay with us for this unforgettable story. When the lights dimmed inside the Grand Theater of America's Got Talent, the audience buzzed with excitement. The show had seen everything over the years: world-class singers, daredevil stunts, child prodigies, viral sensations. But that night, something different was about to happen. The announcer's voice echoed through the room as the next contestant was introduced, a 91-year-old grandfather from the Philippines named Ernesto Villanueva. A gentle murmur spread through the crowd. 91. On this stage, from the wings, a small, frail man slowly stepped forward. He wore a neatly pressed barong Tagalog, his silver hair combed back carefully. In his trembling hands, he held an old photograph pressed against his chest. His steps were slow, assisted by a simple wooden cane, but there was something unshakable in his posture. When he reached the center of the stage, the applause was warm but cautious. The judges smiled politely. One of them, Simon Cowell, leaned forward with curiosity. Over the years on America's Got Talent, he had seen contestants of all ages, but this was rare. Simon asked gently, "Sir, what brings you here tonight?" Ernesto lifted the microphone closer to his mouth. His voice, though soft, carried a surprising steadiness. "I came here to sing for my wife," he said. "She passed away 6 months ago. She always wanted to see this stage. She always said, 'Ernesto, one day you will sing in America.' I told her I was too old. She said love is never too old." The audience fell silent. One of the judges asked, "How long were you married?" Ernesto smiled faintly. 70 years. A collective gasp rippled across the theater. 70 years of love. 70 years of shared mornings, shared tears, shared struggles. 70 years that ended in a hospital room where he held her hand as the machines grew quiet. Simon's tone softened. "And you have terminal cancer, is that correct?" Ernesto nodded calmly. "The doctors say maybe 3 months. Maybe less. But I wanted to keep my promise before I go." The room shifted. This was no longer just another audition. The music began softly. A simple piano melody filled the space. Ernesto closed his eyes. His first note surprised everyone. It was not weak. It was not fragile. It was rich, textured with decades of life. There was pain in it, yes, but also warmth. As he sang, the words told the story of a young soldier who fell in love with a shy girl in Manila after World War II. He sang about stolen dances under lantern light, about building a tiny wooden house by hand, about raising children during years when money was scarce but laughter was abundant. The camera cut to the judges. One of them blinked back tears. Halfway through the song, something unexpected happened. Ernesto paused. The music continued, but he lowered the microphone. For a moment, the audience thought he had forgotten the lyrics. A wave of nervous whispers moved through the crowd. Simon leaned forward again. Ernesto reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph he had been holding earlier. He looked at it tenderly. "This is her," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "Her name is Lourdes." The giant screen behind him lit up with the image. A young woman with bright eyes and a radiant smile stared back at the audience. "I used to sing this too. Her every anniversary," he continued. "But tonight, I will sing the last verse the way she asked me to." The music softened. Then he did something no one expected. He began singing in Tagalog. The audience didn't understand the words, but they understood the emotion. His voice trembled as he sang about meeting her again beyond this life, about crossing a river of light where sickness could not follow. His tone cracked, and for a second it seemed he might collapse. But he didn't. Instead, his voice grew stronger. As he reached the final note, something even more astonishing happened. From the wings, a children's choir quietly joined in, harmonizing the final chorus in English. Ernesto looked surprised. He hadn't known about this arrangement. The producers had contacted his family in secret, and his grandchildren had helped organize the choir as a tribute. Tears streamed down his face. The entire audience rose to their feet before the song even ended. When the final note faded, the theater erupted. It was not just applause. It was something deeper, something collective. People weren't clapping for technical perfection. They were clapping for devotion. For a lifetime of love condensed into 4 minutes. Simon Cowell stood slowly. For a man known for his composure, his eyes were visibly wet. "I have judged this show for many years," Simon said. "I've seen incredible talent. But what you gave us tonight was not just a song. It was a life." The other judges nodded, unable to speak immediately. Then came the first twist of the night. Simon reached for the golden buzzer. The audience screamed in anticipation. But he hesitated. Instead of pressing it immediately, he asked, "Ernesto, did your wife ever get to travel outside the Philippines?" Ernesto shook his head. "No. She always wanted to see America." Simon looked toward the producers, then back at Ernesto. "Well," he said, "I think it's time she did." Behind Ernesto, the screen changed again. A video montage appeared. It showed Lord's photograph digitally placed in iconic American locations: the Statue of Liberty, the Grand Canyon, Times Square. The show had arranged for a special memorial tour in her honor, sponsored by the network, where her family would travel across the United States carrying her framed photo to the places she had dreamed of seeing. The audience gasped again. Ernesto covered his mouth with trembling fingers. "And that," Simon finished, finally pressing the golden buzzer, "is for both of you." Golden confetti rained down. The crowd roared. But the story didn't end there. Backstage, during the post-performance interview, Ernesto suddenly felt dizzy. The cameras caught the moment his knees buckled. Stagehands rushed to steady him. The joyful atmosphere shifted instantly to concern. He was escorted to a medical room. For several long minutes, no one in the audience knew what was happening. The judges remained seated, visibly shaken. After what felt like an eternity, the host returned to the stage with an update. Ernesto was stable. Exhausted, but smiling. The show continued that night, but no act could match what had just occurred. Over the next few days, the clip of his audition spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions of Americans watched the 91-year-old grandfather sing to his late wife. Veterans wrote messages thanking him for representing a generation that endured war and hardship. Young couples shared the video on their anniversaries. Hospice workers played the song for patients in hospital rooms. Then came another twist. A renowned oncologist from California saw the video. Moved by Ernesto's courage, he reached out to offer an experimental treatment at no cost. It was not a cure, but it could extend his life by several months. When asked whether he would take it, Ernesto gave a surprising answer. "I will," he said. "But not for me. I want to live long enough to stand on that stage one more time." Weeks later, during the live semifinal round of America's Got Talent, Ernesto returned. Thinner, weaker, but still standing. This time, he didn't sing a sad song. He sang an upbeat love song from the 1950s, the same one he had danced to with Lords on their wedding night. The audience clapped along. The judges laughed through their tears. Midway through the performance, something magical happened again. The giant screen displayed home videos sent by his family. Footage of Ernesto and Lords dancing in their living room just a year earlier, moving slowly but smiling widely. The entire theater watched their real love story unfold. When the song ended, there was no need for dramatic pauses. The audience's reaction said everything. Though he did not ultimately win the competition, something greater had already happened. Donations poured into a foundation established in Lord's name to support elderly immigrants battling terminal illness. Within weeks, it had raised millions. Ernesto spent his remaining months traveling with his children and grandchildren across America, carrying Lord's photo exactly as promised. At the Grand Canyon, he whispered, "We made it, my love." 3 months later, Ernesto passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family. But his audition never faded. Every anniversary of that episode, America's Got Talent replays a portion of his performance. New viewers discover it each year. New couples hold hands while watching. New families cry together. Because his story was never about winning a trophy. It was about a promise kept. A 91-year-old grandfather stood on one of the biggest stages in the world and proved that love can outlive illness, distance, even death itself. And somewhere beyond the lights and applause, perhaps Lords heard every note.